The Killing Fields of Cambodia, also known as the Khmer Rouge regime, was a tragic period in Cambodian history that lasted from 1975 to 1979. During this time, the communist Khmer Rouge regime led by Pol Pot controlled Cambodia, which they termed as Democratic Kampuchea. Mass killings, political persecution, forced labor, famine, and torture occurred during the Khmer Rouge rule. Since the early 20th century, nationalism had been growing in Asia, fueled by awareness of their own cultural and political identity. Cambodians began demanding independence and autonomy from French colonial rule. A wave of national independence swept through many former colonies in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. World War II accelerated the decolonization process worldwide as France itself was weakened by the war. Political activities increased in Cambodia in the mid-20th century, with the formation of political parties advocating for independence and autonomy from colonial powers. World War II significantly weakened French colonial power. France itself was divided by the German invasion, and Cambodia was one of the areas directly affected by this instability. King Norodom Sihanouk, who was leading Cambodia at that time, saw this as an opportunity. Sihanouk used his diplomatic skills to advocate for Cambodia's independence in international forums. Finally, in 1953, Cambodia achieved its independence from France under the leadership of King Norodom Sihanouk after lengthy negotiations. However, like other former colonial countries, this country experienced political tensions and internal conflicts after independence, with Sihanouk trying to maintain power balance and avoid foreign interference. Then, in 1955, the Vietnam War broke out. The war began after the division of Vietnam into two separate countries, North Vietnam supported by the Soviet Union and China, and South Vietnam supported by the United States. This worsened the situation in Southeast Asia. The United States pressured the government of Cambodia, led by King Norodom Sihanouk, to allow attacks on North Vietnamese forces using Cambodia as a supply route. Although Sihanouk tried to maintain neutrality, pressure from the United States increased. Sihanouk's neutrality policy in the Vietnam War was not always supported by all elements within the country. There were groups that supported U.S. intervention in Cambodia to fight communism. Dissatisfaction with Sihanouk's policies further worsened domestic tensions. Lon Nol, who was then a Cambodian army general, along with his allies, felt that Sihanouk's neutrality policy weakened Cambodia's ability to defend itself against communist threats. They saw the need for more decisive action in dealing with the situation. Lon Nol, the leader of the Khmer People's Revolutionary Party, and other military groups began planning a coup against the Sihanouk government with support from the United States. A flashback to the emergence of the Khmer Rouge People's Revolutionary Party, this began with the Cambodian communist movement arising from the country's struggle against French colonization in the 1940s, triggered by the First Indochina War in the 1950s. The Khmer Rouge Army was gradually established in the jungles of eastern Cambodia during the late 1960s, supported by the North Vietnamese Army, Viet Cong, Pathet Lao, and the Chinese Communist Party, CPC. The term, Khmer Rouge, was coined in the 1960s by Norodom Sihanouk to describe his heterogeneous and communist rebels. Over the next 20 years, this movement took root and began to grow. By March 1970, Lon Nol, with support from the United States, staged a coup against King Sihanouk and seized power. Lon Nol justified his coup as a move to protect Cambodia from communist threats and to uphold the country's sovereignty. However, this coup also provided legitimacy to the new government to gain international support, especially from the United States. Lon Nol then declared the establishment of a pro-American Khmer Republic. The Khmer Republic later became a key ally of the United States in efforts to combat communist guerrillas and North Vietnamese forces in the region. The United States provided significant political, military, and financial support to the Lon Nol regime. They saw the Khmer Republic as a crucial ally in their efforts to halt the spread of communism in Southeast Asia. This support included direct military aid, airstrikes, and assistance in the form of logistics and military training. Cambodia's involvement in the Vietnam War led to increased domestic tensions. The Cambodian government, led by Lon Nol at the time, sought to confront communist guerrillas active along the border with Vietnam. Internal conflicts worsened due to foreign intervention, including from the United States and South Vietnam, which conducted air and ground attacks in Cambodian territory. The US government carried out airstrikes in Cambodia as part of their strategy to pursue and destroy North Vietnamese bases in the region. These airstrikes had devastating effects on Cambodia. Widespread bombing caused damage to infrastructure, including homes, schools, hospitals, and other public facilities. Thousands of Cambodian civilians were killed or injured as a result of these attacks. These assaults worsened the situation in Cambodia and triggered reactions from various opposition groups, including the Communist Khmer Rouge movement led by Pol Pot. The communist movement led by Pol Pot became the precursor to an unimaginable darkness in human history. With assistance from Vietnam, the Khmer Rouge began defeating Lon Nol's forces on the battlefield. By the end of 1972, Vietnam withdrew from Cambodia and handed over primary responsibility for the war to the Communist Party of Kampuchea (CPK), or Khmer Rouge, directly led by Pol Pot. From January to August 1973, the Republic of Khmer government, aided by the US, dropped around 500,000 tons of bombs on Cambodia, estimated to have killed up to 300,000 people. Many who disliked the bombings or lost family members eventually joined the Khmer Rouge Revolution. By early 1973, about 85% of Cambodia's territory was in the hands of the Khmer Rouge, and Lon Nol's army was almost unable to launch attacks. However, with US assistance, they managed to continue fighting the Khmer Rouge for another 2 years. April 17, 1975, marked the end of 5 years of foreign intervention, bombing, and civil war in Cambodia. On this date, Phnom Penh, a major city in Cambodia, fell to communist forces. Life in Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge regime began. Within days of seizing power in 1975, the Khmer Rouge forced around 2 million people in Phnom Penh and other cities to move to the countryside to engage in agricultural work. Thousands died during the evacuation. The Khmer Rouge also began implementing radical Maoist and Marxist-Leninist transformation programs at this time. They aimed to transform Cambodia into a classless rural society where there were no rich people, no poor people, and no exploitation. To achieve this, they abolished money, free markets, regular schools, private ownership, foreign clothing styles, religious practices, and traditional Khmer culture. Public schools, pagodas, mosques, churches, universities, shops, and government buildings were closed or converted into prisons, stables, re-education camps, and granaries. There was no public or private transportation, no private ownership, and no non-revolutionary entertainment. Recreational activities were severely restricted. People nationwide, including CPK leaders, were required to wear black costumes, their traditional revolutionary attire. During this time, everyone was deprived of their basic rights. People were not allowed to leave their cooperatives. The regime did not permit anyone to gather and discuss. If 3 people gathered and talked, they could be accused of being enemies and arrested or executed. Family relationships were also heavily criticized. People were prohibited from showing affection, humor, or even the slightest bit of compassion. The Khmer Rouge instructed all Cambodian people to believe in, obey, and honor only Angkar Patavat, which would be the mother and father to everyone. Angkar Patavat is the term used by the Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia to refer to their government or highest authority. The Khmer Rouge stated that only pure people were eligible to build the revolution. Soon after seizing power, they captured and killed thousands of soldiers, military officers, and civil servants from the Lon Nol regime, whom they deemed impure. Over the next 3 years, they executed hundreds of thousands of intellectuals, urban residents, minority groups such as Cham, Vietnamese, and Chinese, and many of their own party members, whom they accused of being traitors. Many were detained in prisons, where they were held, interrogated, tortured, and executed. Cambodia's most important prison, known as S21, held around 14,000 detainees while in operation. Only about 12 survived. Based on the CPK's 4-year plan, in 1976, Cambodian society was expected to produce 3 tons of rice per hectare nationwide. This meant that people had to plant and harvest rice for 12 months a year. In most areas, the Khmer Rouge forced people to work more than 12 hours a day without rest or sufficient food. However, by the end of 1977, clashes broke out between Cambodia and Vietnam. Tens of thousands were sent to fight, and thousands were killed. In December 1978, Vietnamese forces invaded Cambodia. They seized Phnom Penh on January 7, 1979. Khmer Rouge leaders then fled to the west and rebuilt their forces in Thailand, aided by China and Thailand. The United Nations decided to give the anti-communist resistance, including the Khmer Rouge, a seat in the General Assembly. From 1979 to 1990, they were recognized as the sole legitimate representatives of Cambodia. In 1982, the Khmer Rouge formed a coalition with Prince Sihanouk, who was exiled in China after the Cambodian Civil War, and non-communist leader Son Sann to form the three-party coalition government. Meanwhile, in Phnom Penh, Vietnam helped form a new government, the People's Republic of Kampuchea, led by Heng Samrin. The Khmer Rouge continued to exist until 1999 when all their leaders defected to the royal government of Cambodia, were arrested, or died. However, their legacy remained. Democratic Kampuchea was one of the worst humanitarian tragedies of the 20th century. Nearly 2 million Cambodians died from diseases due to lack of medicine and medical services, starvation, executions, or exhaustion from overwork. Tens of thousands became widows and orphans, and those who lived through the regime were deeply traumatized by their experiences. Hundreds of thousands of Cambodians fled their country and became refugees. Millions of landmines were laid by the Khmer Rouge and government forces, resulting in thousands of deaths and disabilities since the 1980s. Most Cambodian society suffered from mental disorders due to their missing family members and their damaged souls. These factors are among the main causes of poverty in Cambodia to this day.